Welcome to this practice. You're going to be exploring alongside of my yoga therapy trainees the process of the 4 hardwire reactions in our nervous system: fight, flight, freeze, and submit, and how to give space for compassionate attention towards and a kind of refuge for the parts of us that learned to create internal scaffolds of behavior and thought processes and mechanisms about fight, flight, freeze, and submit. Those are neurologically hardwired reactions onto which we added behavior patterns, patterns for safety. As I like to say, those were initially protective mechanisms, but then they become preservative. Those protective mechanisms keep preserving their own status quo. They keep getting utilized by us because we don't have other mechanisms to use yet. So we go to the default mode of these mechanisms. So what was protective becomes preservative, and then that becomes preventative. In other words, it puts kind of a ceiling on our life. It dampens our ability to evolve. So it's preventing us from becoming that which we could be, that which we're meant to be. It prevents our evolution while taking care of our survival. And we do have this imperative in our system to survive as part of our primitive brain, but we also have an imperative to evolve. So as we say, sometimes we don't want to just be surviving, we want to be thriving. Well, thriving is going to depend on overcoming some of those long-held protective mechanisms. They initially do start as protection. They can become painful mechanisms too. So you might recognize some of those things as addiction or compulsion or anxiety or depression, or the part that acquiesces to others or is constantly in a please and appease mode, or the part that can't tolerate emotions or doesn't know how to experience emotions. So all of those things that show up in our daily adult life, they have connections back to our early implicit messages, early embodied experiences. Those embodied experiences gave us a lens on the world, a view, a perspective of what life was meant to be and how we were meant to show up. And those are called relational anticipations. We carry that with us. So we say in interpersonal neurobiology, the ever-present past shows up in the now. And it takes over actually because the ever-present past has significant body memory, is connected to your right brain and your limbic brain. It didn't get developed at a time when your neocortex was functioning yet. So the ever-present past is a very powerful repository of unmet needs, experiences, impressions, waiting for us to turn towards it for healing. In the present moment, we can experience that ever-present past as things like urgency, frenzy, chaos, the feeling that we have to solve for something. And so what can go on is that our adult, capable, competent self is being driven by an ever-present past. And we start solving for things using our limbic brain instead of going up to the neocortex. So in this practice, you're going to experience some yoga interventions or remedies that will help to bring you and or your clients or students back into the possibility of the present moment with a nervous system that's more intact, more loving, more wise, more kind, and that can make better decisions as to how to go about navigating the day without simply succumbing to the invisible marionette strings that are pulling on behavioral tugs from the past. Okay, so I hope you find this helpful. As always, leave your questions and comments down below the video. If this kind of content is interesting to you in terms of yoga psychology or yoga therapy, please do check out the Yoga Teacher Training School. The Yoga Therapy Training Program is also there. You can see that on the URL across the bottom of the screen here. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please do that too. I'd love to know that you're in the community here working on this healing, not just for yourself, but for the greater good of the society and humanity. Thank you so much. Let's go to the practice now. So good morning. Welcome for practice. Let's take a quiet seat to begin. You can rest your hands in your lap. You're welcome to close your eyes. And allow your breathing to give you access to your inner self. Even if right now it's like a little pinhole of light, to be connected there. As you connect with your breathing and with your body, just gradually allow more and more access for the breath to take care of you. Moment to moment and breath to breath, you may be observing the arriving process, which can be a navigation between letting go of daily life tasks and responsibilities and turning into this more sacred opportunity to connect with and to understand yourself. So to the best of your ability, relax any unnecessary tension, particularly in the torso and your diaphragm, so the breath can help you to have access to your inner self. You may also want to release habitual places of tension, such as between the eyebrows, at the corners of the eyes, at the hinge of your jaw, in your tongue and throat region, perhaps in the upper part of the shoulder blades or the space between your shoulder blades. As you're making your effort here, breath to breath, give yourself the chance to notice both the challenges or the struggle to become present and the inner desire to do so. Those may be like competing aspects of yourself right now, but allow awareness for each of those. And then gently increase the length of your inhalation and the length of your exhalation. You start to take this little bit of inner leadership, and during practice, we want to have access to the part of us that is on a healing journey without dismissing or exiling the part of us that might feel challenged or have difficulty in arriving right now. So there's no part of us that is a nuisance or an annoyance. There's nothing right now that we're setting out into the backyard or the corner of the bedroom. There's nothing that we're quote unquote getting rid of, but we are going to increase access. Lengthen the inhale, lengthen the exhale to increase access to that in you, which wants to be on a healing path and a healing journey. And even if this part at times seems faint or minuscule or fragile, right now as you breathe in, as you breathe out, increase your acknowledgement to this part of yourself. And as you're acknowledging this, let it also be acknowledged by me. If we were sitting in the same room, you'd feel that more palpably, but certainly I also acknowledge the part of you that wants to be on this healing path and using this practice to help yourself. And you can also imagine it being acknowledged by the countless others who too share this intention, this deep desire for healing. So as you increase access to this, what you're practicing is inflating that aspect of yourself. And by inflating, we mean as properly filling up a balloon. We're not overinflating, we're not exaggerating, but properly inflating, bringing enough space and energy and vibrancy to this part of yourself. This part is inherently curious and courageous and has a strong intention. In recognition of this, please join your hands now at your heart. And may this practice and this journey be one where you find protection, nourishment, and strength, where we overcome the habits of darkness or the habits of darkening our understanding of ourselves. We return to the possibility of tejas or luminosity to see ourselves clearly and brightly. And may we not face things like impatience or animosity along the way. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Punaktu Savidyang Karava Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma vidveshavai Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Saviryang Karavai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma vidveshavai Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Saviryang Karavai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma vidveshavai Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Shri Guru Pyo Namaha Hari Om. With your exhale, you may bow your head to your heart. Release your hands and open your eyes. So in understanding the parts of us that have the inclination to default into less than helpful practices, behaviors, and patterns, we can look at it through the lens of the nervous system. We have a part that goes to fight, flight, freeze, submit. So of course you have more parts than this, but there are 4 hardwired neurological reactions that we may fall into. Fight or flight both pick up on our sympathetic nervous system arousal. Freeze and submit both utilize our parasympathetic ability to suppress or to oppress our system, to submit, collapse, or deflate ourselves. So fight and flight are more upward and outward. Though there can be an internal experience of fight and an internal experience of flight. Freeze and submit are more deregulating, down pressuring. So the whole system is going down, down, down like that. We become frozen or immobilized and also deflated or collapsed, past immobilization to a place of like internal vacancy or numbness. So those are 4 options in the nervous system. Of course, there's also this beautiful opportunity to heal from those things. These are not simply hardwired, where we end up succumbing day after day, moment to moment, we can rise out of those patterns. And yoga is a great way to do that, particularly utilizing the breath and the body to help overcome these long-standing patterns that have become reflexive and robotic, where the body and the mind, they could do it in their sleep. So yoga is the practice of waking up from that kind of trance-like ongoing submission to these patterns. So I'd like to address each of the patterns in sequence. And so I have a little list that I've made for myself so I can stay on track with you. In looking at each pattern, understand that it has a purpose. Before we try to remedy it, let's understand that there has been a purposeful effort in your system for safety. So each of these patterns has been designed for safety, both in the neurological system of the human organism and other organisms on the planet that also use fight, flight, freeze, and submit. It is designed for safety and protection. So at some level, our neurological system had to make a decision biasing survival and safety. And so if you have a long-standing pattern in your life using these particular fight, flight, freeze, submit, and you find that now it's no longer producing safety the way that it once did, it's no longer so protective, now it's preventative. It's like you cannot move your life forward because of it. So it's preventing that which you want to become or move towards. If that has occurred, then we need some remedies for that. So what was once protective can then become what I call preservative. It holds things as they have been. And then it can become preventative. We are unable to move forward from it without some kind of intervention or remedy. In this case, yoga provides those interventions and remedies. So take heart that healing is possible. I'm going to move back to my seat. So we'll take a look at the process of deflation, what happens before we're totally down in submit. So before the deflation process takes over completely, there are some little places like a fork in the road where you could prevent that from happening. Okay, so in this, we're going to be doing a blowing off technique, a breathing practice that prevents us from being taken down by the submit part of ourselves. You could think of it as the submit monster, the part that's going to take us down into a sedated, numb, collapsed place. When you want to overcome that, first you acknowledge that that part has been there for safety and it's been well practiced, and that today you don't want to succumb to that. Okay, so we're going to be spreading the fingers open. That's one very important thing, because a collapsed state, everything is kind of curled in on itself. So we'll spread the fingers open. We'll be reaching up. We're also going to pull down with this kind of action of determination. And this is an inhale. This is an exhale. And both of them are going to be brisk. So go with me here. Five, four, three, two, one. Now inhale, reach up. And exhale, float the arms out to the side. As your arms come down, lengthen up through the crown of your skull. And practice not giving up on yourself, not going to deflate mode. It may help to have internal statements that you give to yourself. It could be something like, today I won't succumb, or today I won't give up on myself. But it also could be a positive statement like, I'm worth caring about. My determination matters. You make your own statements. And we're going to repeat that activity Going up with the inhale, pulling down with the exhale. This is a sense of like some strength on board, right? So begin when you're ready. Five, four, three, two, one. Now inhale, reach up. Exhale, float the arms out to the side. Lengthen up through your spine and the crown of your skull so that when your hands rest on your lap, there is an internal sense of rising while also having a sense of dropping into the present moment. And make a little statement inside for yourself. Today is a day where I won't give up on myself. Where I can focus on my intentions. Sometimes it has to be even smaller. You might even say, I can keep small commitments to myself. I'm worth that. Now we're going to add to this particular yoga intervention. Interlace your fingers. Press the heels of the hands forward. Inhale, rise up. And keep reaching up for several breath cycles. Notice that when you're lifting the torso here, there is access to your diaphragm, and it's able to breathe you relatively deeply. And by deep, I don't mean the quantity of the breath, but rather the geography of the breath. As you listen for the fullness of the inhale that's possible here, let the breath give you greater and greater access to the part of you that actually has some determination. And this part determined not to let the deflation habit take over. And by deflation, again, I mean where you give up on yourself, where you disregard yourself, you fall into the same old pattern. You know, as you exhale, press the arms out to the side, rotate and twist to your right. And then as you exhale, interlace your fingers, come back to center. Inhale, rise up. Exhale, take the arms wide, twist your spine to your left, look over your left shoulder. As you're looking over your shoulder, you might imagine the surround of the day, like even visualizing the terrain where you know you tend to have some difficulties. And let yourself imagine that in those difficulties, you don't have to get derailed. You could also remind yourself of your internal phrase. Today is a day when I'm not going to collapse or forego myself. You won't succumb to default mode where you end up deflating or succumbing. And then exhale, come back to center, interlace your fingers, inhale, reach up. And stay with the breath for several cycles here. It's like you're inflating, let's say, a balloon properly inflated. So it's not overinflated. With this inner sense of courage or commitment or determination, whatever word is suited for you. And all the while, one thing you are saying to yourself is that you matter to yourself. You matter, your health matters, your choices matter. As you next exhale, press out, clear out the psychic space around you, and then return your hands to your heart. Acknowledge yourself. Okay, now what to do if that collapse or submit already took over and you found yourself going down this rabbit hole where there you are, you've already made the choice and it's kind of taken you away. It's taken you on that familiar ride. So let's imagine that that has occurred and that you don't want to be stuck there. You don't want to end up having that go on for hours or days or weeks at a time. So come over to your hands and knees, please. Let's come to table pose. And then from table pose, step your right hand well out in front of you. Press your fingertips down. As you reach back, lower your left elbow to the floor. Relax the weight of your head. And as you're breathing in here, allow the inhale to move into the pelvis, into your lower back, the sides of your waist, especially the right side. And if possible, bring some of the breath up into your heart. As you exhale, focus on completing the exhale, which is going to require some tone and strength in the deep lower belly. As you're stretching out and you're moving from a place, possibly a place of submit or deflation, it may feel like a little bit painful to reach out to give yourself permission to open back up. So bring a compassionate and warm voice tone. As you next inhale, return to table pose. Place your right palm flat down. Walk the left hand forward. Reach your hips back. Bow your head. And bring the breath deeply into the lower pelvis, your lower back, the side of your waist. Possibly up into your heart and your collarbones as well. Welcome yourself to receive the breath, even if opening from a place of submit to a place of possibility feels painful or tender. Remind yourself that you're worth it and that your body knows how to shift out of a submit state back into a state of grounding or centering. And as you next inhale, bring yourself up to table pose. Reach back to child's pose. You can put the toes together, open the knees apart. As you walk back to this child's pose, drop the hips back, but actively walk your fingertips forward. Lengthen the back hemisphere of your body here. Allow the breath to find its way into the pelvis, the lower abdomen, the back of your waist. So in the low part of the torso, in the pelvic region, and the abdominal region, we have our dorsal vagal reflexes. And the gut-brain axis, as you breathe into the lower belly, you are giving a message from the gut back up to the brain. And this message is one of willingness to not stay in a submit mode, but rather willingness to participate with your body's intelligence or your inner desire for healing or wholeness. But keeping the arms active, take another inhale into the lower belly and the back of the waist. And then exhale and come up into table pose with tone in the lower belly. Now inhale, press into cat pose. Exhale, come to cow pose. Bring your chest and heart forward. On the inhale, reach the heart forward. So this is a little bit of a back bend relative to where we were. And then exhale, reach back to child's pose. Squeeze the breath out. And now we'll make this one smooth movement. Inhale, roll up to cat. Exhale forward to cow pose. Inhale the heart forward. And exhale, roll back to child's pose, using child's pose to help squeeze the breath out, not a child's pose where you're going into hiding. Inhale smoothly up to cat pose. Exhale to cow pose. Take the pubic bone back, bring your heart forward. And inhale, open the front hemisphere of the body. And exhale, reach back to child's pose, squeezing the breath out like you're squeezing a sponge. And one more time, inhale, cat pose. Exhale, cow pose. Curl your toes under, and this time we're going to inhale and raise up to downward facing dog pose. Lift your hips high. Use the strength of your arms, and from the center of your heart, press actively down and forward. Using the arms to press in that way is really the opposite of collapsing or submitting. You are right now pressing from the heart down through the arms into the hands, fingers, and thumbs. It's an act of determination, an act of commitment. Raise your hips high and allow the breath to be full on the inhale and complete on the exhale. And then exhale and touch your knees down to the floor and come to sit in Vajrasana, which is a kneeling position. So you also could change that to a sitting position or make it somehow more comfortable for your knees if needed. Notice what's happening for you with your body as you bring yourself from a possible place of submit or dorsal vagal or collapse into a little bit more aliveness here. What's happening now? And what kind of internal phrase would feel meaningful to you? Something like, my needs matter, or I'm on my own team, or I'm here for myself. Sometimes it really helps to sense the parts of us, like the part of us that learned to go to submit or collapse as a safety mechanism. You might now want to say to that part, like, I'm here for you, which means that larger love or wisdom, clarity that you actually have access to. I'm here for you, this vulnerable part that learned how to submit or collapse. That can also be a meaningful way to give yourself a little phrase inside. And you can bring your hands to your heart and acknowledge yourself. Okay, I'd like to address the part of us that goes to fight, and it's a specific kind of manifestation of the fight reflex. And this one is the default mode of, I'm going to persevere, I'm going to push through, I'll take on that assignment again, or I'm defaulting into overdoing, right? The part of us that's like, okay, I know how to be perseverant, but it's an expense to you. It may not be an expense to others because you're kind of rising to an occasion, right? You're once again defaulting to, I can overcome this, or I know how to pull up my bootstraps, those invisible bootstraps, or I know how to take on that burden and I'm going to persevere through it. So for this part, when that's coming on, it's really helpful to intervene. And you probably have quite a bit of energy on board when that is coming. You know, as I said in a different setting yesterday in a training program, I was saying, you know, it's the part of you that has wisely decided to leave the office on time, and you are, you know, got your briefcase or whatever you're carrying and you're going out the door, but somebody needs something and you're like, okay, yeah, I can help one more time. I can do one more thing. Or it's the part where you wake up in the morning, you have a full schedule. It's really not attuned to your health or your life, but you're like, I could do it. I can do it again. I'm going to push through. I'm going to push through because my holiday's coming. And sometimes that pushing through, if you recognize it as a long-term pattern, a part of you designed for safety, it's going to be helpful to loosen that pattern a bit, get to know it, and start making some updates or some changes. So let's pretend that part has come on board and you don't want to be the perseverant, overdoing version of yourself. So take a stance in jazz dance warm-up pose, please, like this. It means take a wide stance, bend your knees, place your hands on your knees, press down with your arms so that you're able to lengthen up through the spine. Gaze down at the floor in front of you and begin breathing into the lower pelvis and the lower abdomen. So when we rise to the occasion, as it were, on those moments, we're not actually breathing into the low pelvis. We're not that embodied. We're not that embodied because these safety mechanisms we had to learn, and we disconnected from ourselves in doing that. We disconnected from the body. So let the breath come down into the pelvic basin. As you breathe in deeply and slowly, you might be acknowledging the struggle to not choose being the perseverant version of yourself. The struggle to not choose rising to the occasion once again. Let the breath be smooth, nourishing. Bring yourself here into the present moment. Connect to the deepest knowing in yourself that wants to be on a healing journey and not simply like a marionette succumbing to all the invisible tugs, the implicit messages. Use the breath to connect even more deeply to that inner knowing. As you next inhale, raise your torso and start relying less on your arms and hands. Inhale the arms forward, clasp your fingers. And inhale, reach up. So this is a kind of determination not to engage in an old pattern that has been helpful and has probably served yourself and others. This is a determination to matter more deeply than the pattern. Inhale, rise up. Make your feet parallel. Exhale, press the arms out to the side as you come down. Reach back to interlace your fingers at the small of your back. Roll the shoulders open. Squeeze the upper back and the space between the shoulder blades. Lengthen your neck so the shoulder blades slide up towards your hips. Energize your legs. Allow for a deep breath in and try to see yourself in a little movie. You are in process of not choosing that overly perseverant or determined aspect of yourself. Exhale completely. And then inhale, reach your heart forward, rise up to standing. And exhale, release the clasp of your hand. And let's go heel toe into mountain pose. Now know that as you overcome a pattern, let's say of hyper productivity or competence or uber perseverance, as you overcome that pattern, you get to maintain, you get to still retain your competent, perseverant capacity, but it'll be right-sized, not exploited. So come to mountain pose and imagine yourself with a right-sized effort, an appropriate amount of perseverance, not a rugged determination where you've scraped your knuckles and you're all bruised up. Just an appropriate amount of persevering applied in the right circumstance at the right time. Not overused and exploited. And then you can bring your hands to your heart, acknowledging that deep desire to actually have your own life, your inner life balanced with your outer responsibilities. Now there's a part of the fight reflex that goes into what I call the uber punitive, hypercritical, shaming aspect of who we are. And that's an internal fight. It's like an argument on the inside. You're in conflict with yourself. And what can be happening is the part of you that learned to shame or shun or punish or criticize is taking over. It's like an overlord. And it takes that on because it's afraid of another part misbehaving or causing some kind of exposure for vulnerability. So this uber punitive part can come in and be hypercritical and shaming. And it can do that in a flash. It can come on suddenly. You might feel like your body gets hot. You feel like falling through the floorboards or disappearing, or the shame can also promote the sense of like, I better do better. That feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm about to get found out. I better do better. And it also can come with the sense of this whole thing should be concealed. Nobody should see that this is going on for me because the exposure would feel too great. So in this case, when that's coming on, it's really important to practice a kind of loving, kind, compassionate attitude towards yourself, towards the deepest you that does not want shame to take over again. Okay, so what we're going to do here is an opening of the chest and the heart and a slowing down of the breath so you can stay in your body. I'm going to ask you to find a countertop or a tabletop. I'm going to use this one here. It could be the kitchen counter. It could be your desk. It could be the wall if you have a solid wall. This is a closet door. It's not particularly solid, so I'm not going to use that. These are watercolor paintings. That's not a solid place to put my hands, but I can use this desktop. So find your own tabletop. And sometimes your desk is too short, but if you put blocks on your desk, it's going to be the right height for you. Place your hands and please step back to a kind of dog position, downward facing dog pose, normally done from the floor. And as you place your palms here, lengthen your spine and invite your breath to find its way into the pelvis with an overarching attitude of love or kindness or support. You're inviting that shaming voice not to have so much power right now. In fact, you can let that shaming voice know that your inner wisdom is stronger than shame. As the breath comes in, start acknowledging also the vulnerable part of you that shame was trying to protect. And I know that can sound ironic and bizarre, but the shaming voice comes up as a protector, even though it's very painful. So as you breathe in a deep sense of kindness for yourself. Providing safety to the part of you that is vulnerable. And letting shame see you, taking some inner leadership here for kindness, or acknowledgement, or love, or support. Those of us who've had an inner shaming voice or an inner critic, we have found out through many experiments that it actually doesn't work that well. It does not produce the outcome that we think it's going to produce. We don't become more productive or more elegant or more evolved. We actually become stuck in the critical mind. And so now press down against your palms on the desk or the desktop or the counter and walk forward. Let go. And now we're going to use the wall to open the chest and the heart and the shoulders. So what you'll do is find anything that can substitute here. It could be the door frame, could be the upper kitchen cabinet. It could be, I don't know, like a place in your house where there's a secure frame. Like I have an archway in my hallway there, that's a nice place to do this. I'm going to use the wall behind me. So what you'll do is step up to a spot, place your hand at shoulder height, turn your torso away from your hand, turn your feet, your knees, your hips, your chest, and your heart, and turn only as far as your shoulder is truly comfortable in this opening. Lift your heart, lift your collarbones, raise up through the crown of your skull, and as you breathe in, let the inhale come down to that in you which was vulnerable, to which the shame monster was responding. It came in to criticize you, to punish you, the shame monster is kind of acting like it's trying to put the jack back in the jack in the box. So it's trying to oppress, to criticize, to hold you down. It's like an overarching voice that comes from the top down and pushes us into a dorsal vagal mode. Ultimately, shame acts as a shutting down reflex. As you're breathing in, try to bring this breath of kindness and acknowledgement into the lower pelvis. And invite the hypercritical voice to know that you're making an effort right now, based on some wisdom, discernment, perspective. And then as you exhale, start rotating back towards the wall. Place your other hand up, might be on the kitchen cabinet, could be on the door frame. Could be on your outdoors, could be on a tree, right? Rotate your feet, your chest, your heart, only as far as your shoulder is truly comfortable in doing. And let the breath come down. And remind yourself again that the instinct for the inner critic and or shame, those are both safety mechanisms, even though they're quite painful. And so you want those parts of you to see yourself right now taking this leadership moment, this acts of kindness towards yourself. Whatever got stimulated in the vulnerability, whatever egregious thing shame tells you that you have done or is trying to prevent you from doing, it deserves a chance to be known. We can't know it if shame takes over the system. We end up collapsing and everything basically goes dull and dark. So by breathing in this act of kindness right now, we're also going to give ourselves a chance to know something more about what's going on with our inner life. So as you next exhale, turn towards your arm that's on the wall, let that come down. And come down to a seat. Could be kneeling, could be sitting cross-legged. Could be something a little more grounding. And I'm going to ask you to use a phrase. For example, I'll provide one and you can make up your own. The phrase could be, there is more right with me than there is wrong with me. There is more right with me than there is wrong with me. There is more good about me than there is bad about me. There is more goodness about me than there is bad about me. This kind of phrase, you're letting that inner critic know. You're basically letting it know that you have some additional wisdom about the situation. And shame and self-loathing and criticism, they cannot have greater perspective or wisdom about the situation because they're driven by your limbic brain, which is very limited in perspective. Bring your hands to your heart. Thank yourself for the efforts there. Another hardwired nervous system reaction that we have is called flight. And that's when we take flight from ourselves. So we take flight from somebody else. We get away from a circumstance. Sometimes we do that by dissociating, or we might actually do it, just by abandoning ourselves in a moment where it would matter that we don't do that. But we have this appease and acquiesce mode, and as we call it, the please and appease mode. And that is a form of flight. I'm taking flight. I'm leaving my own values. I'm leaving how I place myself as a person of value in a circumstance, and I default to pleasing and appeasing you. So I'm taking flight of myself, even though I might be appeasing you. And the part of us that goes to flight is doing that for safety again. We also take flight when we leave our own value system. We might set up the day saying, it's going to be a healthy day. I'm going to do my self-care practices. I'm going to put myself on my list. I'm not going to be like off screen here, off the radar screen. I'm going to matter today. And yet you walk out the door and you take flight of those very statements you just made to yourself. You forget about them. You self-abandon. Self-abandonment takes the form of many expressions, but it can be something like, I'm not going to go through the drive-through today, and then there you are in the drive-through, whatever that might be. I'm not going to go to that Starbucks line today, but then there you are in the Starbucks line. Like you made a commitment in a moment of mental well-being and mental clarity, and then something happened. Your body got activated, your nervous system, your implicit memories got tossed up, and you're in the same line to do the same thing, abandoning the commitment that you had made to yourself earlier in the day. So it can be a self-abandonment. It can also be a please and appease to somebody else. We give up on ourselves to please and appease because we might be avoiding a conflict that we don't know how to solve. So these are safety mechanisms, and we want to acknowledge that that's why they're there. And we also want to overcome them, because what has been there to provide protection becomes, again, preservative, preserves the status quo. Then it becomes preventative. We can't move forward in our life. So let's picture that you got into one of those kind of moments of awareness. Oh, I'm about to self-abandon. I'm about to take that experience again. And you don't want to do it. You don't want to take flight. You want to stay in your value system, in your sense of center. Take a wide stance. And I don't think you can do this right in front of the boss, right? And you're going to do it before you get in the car to go to the drive-through, or before you're walking into Starbucks, like, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. If that was one of the commitments you made to yourself, was like less caffeine or less commercialized beverages or something, whatever it was for you. Okay, a wide stance. Take the arms out to the side. Now imagine the breath filling up the entire circumference of this space. What you're saying to yourself is, my values matter and I matter. You're not going to go invisible or dissociate, or go invisible means pleasing and appeasing others, but inside there you become a shell of yourself. You just become the appeaser part of you. It's kind of like acquiescing. Just become the acquiescing part of yourself. Right now, breathe in to the whole circumference of who you are and that space that you get to occupy. Turn your right foot out. And exhale, come into warrior two to your right, gaze to your right. And breathe in deeply and lovingly. Breathe in a way where you get grounded, you connect back into the lower hemisphere of your body. You are here in the present, standing your ground, so you're not going to be appeasing, acquiescing, taking flight, as if you were abandoning yourself. With your next inhale, rise up to center, hands to the heart. Turn your right foot in, turn the left foot out. Inhale again, try it on, expanding out into the space you get to occupy. And holding on to your own inner value system, come down to your left into warrior two. Gaze over your left fingers. And practice breathing in a way that encompasses this entire circumference from your feet to your fingertips to the crown of your skull, the front body and the back body. so that you get to matter to yourself. All the while, let that part of you that knows how to appease, how to acquiesce, how to please, how to maintain safety, let it know that you're not disregarding the need for safety, but you're trying to bring greater wisdom and perspective in right now. Let's do next inhale, rise up to center, make the feet parallel. Let's bring the heel toe in. You may have noticed in your life a correlation between when I please and appease, or acquiesce and regress. Pardon me for the little cute phrases there, but if you have some phrases, it does help you to recognize the process. Please and appease is something that we learned a long time ago. It works to a certain extent. Acquiesce and regress means I'm acquiescing again because it's a part of my history. So it's a little bit regressive for me to go back there. But when we're doing that, you might notice that another part of you is going to the snack machine, the vending machine, or getting one more coffee or soda, or, please and appease. Oh, I'll have a donut while I do that. Okay, so we don't want to have this safety mechanism that now needs us to numb the pain of that self-abandoning. Okay, so warrior two is one way to do that. Now we're going to step to the front of the mat. And when we step backwards, we're going to be stepping backwards into something of strength. So inhale, raise both arms up overhead. Exhale, bend your knees, come to chair pose. Inhale, rise up. And exhale, bend your knees, take the left toes back, step back into this position of strength. Root down into your legs, so there is a place of grounding. Rise up with your heart. Give yourself permission to have your own needs and values, and not simply to please and appease, nor to acquiesce and regress. Now, in a moment, when we go forward to stand up, there's going to be a strong inhale and a strong exhale. So let's breathe in deeply, and on the exhale, step forward and pull the arms down. So like you arrive in this place of solid strength. And then inhale, sweep the arms up. Exhale, bend your knees, come to chair pose. Inhale, rise up. Exhale, bend the knees, take your right toes back. Inhale, lift up and strengthen the lower hemisphere of your body and the reach that you have where your values are going to matter to you on this day. In fact, you're going to keep mattering to yourself, and today is not a day of self-abandonment. Okay, now we're going to inhale, strong breath in. And then exhale, step forward, pull the arms down, and take your stance. Momentarily close your eyes in mountain pose. And listen for that inner feeling of grounding and assuredness. You don't have to self-abandon and then have to self-sedate later. You can hold on to yourself during the day, not taking flight away from yourself. You can hold on to your inner self during the day. Bring your hands to your heart and appreciate yourself once again. Okay, and then please come down to the floor. So now another form of the nervous system reactions is called freeze. So we have fight, flight, freeze, submit, where we go into a collapse mode. And freeze is where we become immobilized. We actually become kind of like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to move from here. And it can feel paralyzing, actually. It's a very important aspect of the nervous system. And if we've learned to freeze as a way of staying safe, we want to be really respectful about that. And again, it can become preventative. So we aren't able to move forward. We keep succumbing to these freeze reactions where it's kind of like feeling stunned, right? And sometimes what ends up happening is we are stressed in certain ways all throughout the day, or we find a very stressful peak experience. And then we know how to self-sedate. We know how to kind of self-freeze. And when I say preservative, you can actually think of it as when something gets preserved in ice, it becomes a fossil. We kind of become like fossilized versions of ourselves. We're not really there. There'd be an imprint in the ice if you saw it, but we are not in there. We are very deep inside, not having access to the neocortex, but being lost in a parasympathetic down regulation of the system, like a deregulating experience. So to help ourselves not get stuck there, I'm going to ask you to come onto your back, please, with your knees bent. And then let's bring the knees into the chest. You can hold behind each of the kneecaps. Feel free to clasp the hands if it makes it easier to hold. And then you can imagine that in the freeze state, we don't tend to be breathing very well. And so right now, all I'm going to ask you to do is relax your shoulders back and down towards the floor. Release the weight of your head. Begin to picture the back hemisphere of your body melting a little bit, releasing tension. You can imagine that like when there's a tiny pat of butter in a slightly warmed pan, that the butter begins to melt, and we're inviting unnecessary tension to melt away. A very common form of freeze in today's society is when people get stuck to the couch after scrolling. They become so downregulated or sedated. The levels of dopamine and serotonin have dropped, and the person is sort of frozen there, stuck, a little bit fossilized. So right now, imagine that you've come from something like that, perhaps, and you're resting, knees to chest. Allow the breath to return. As you begin inhaling, welcome the inhale to press against the knees. So the breath is going to expand against the back body, into the floor, the sides of the waist, and also into the knees and the thighs. Exhale completely. And inhale slowly. Without asking too much too soon of yourself or your body, with respect for why freeze is a mechanism that we've chosen. Let's now roll the knees side to side. Think of it as a gesture of comfort and also rhythm. So whether you're rolling just the knees or you can roll the whole body side to side, do it as a comforting rhythm for yourself. I find that an attitude of tenderness and self-respect is far better than an attitude of like punishment or condemnation. Okay, the next time that you're taking both knees over to the right, go ahead and bring that into a little spine twist. Drop both knees down to the right, and then sweep your left arm up. And exhale, open to your left. Let's keep the knees together and stacked, and the knees can also stay somewhat close to the chest and the heart. As you go to open the left upper chest and shoulder, remind yourself that safety does matter to you and to all of your parts. And remind those parts that you have a wiser perspective on safety right now. And looking at the safety of really being connected to our indwelling self, inner resources, inner intelligence. With your next inhale, make a big circle with the left arm. Reach up past your ear. Bring it back over, and let's change to the other side. So raise the knees up. Roll down to your right. You can place your left hand on your right knee. Push the right arm past your right ear. Breathe in. And then exhale and roll the upper chest open. As you reach out to your right here, allow the breath to come down into the lower abdomen. To the parts of you that learned how to choose the freeze reflex, let them know that you are here, guiding the breath, guiding the practice, taking care of your body. And inhale, raise your right arm, reach past your right ear, bring it back over to the knees, and then rolling onto your back. Let's touch the knees down to the floor. Okay, press into the heels of both feet, press into your toes. As you inhale, lift your tailbone and consider raising your hips and your pelvis up any height that you're able to do. So here you're using large muscles of the legs, the glutes and the hamstrings, and you're using muscles that are powerfully used to engage strength. So kind of the opposite of that freeze. On the exhale, roll your hips down and let it roll down one vertebrae at a time. And inhale, roll up. Press down through your heels and toes. Lift your tailbone. Tone the back of the pelvis, the glutes, and the hamstrings. And exhale, roll down, folding the floating ribs in and knit the abdomen in towards a sense of strength. Again, inhale to go up. And exhale to roll down. If you've been in a freeze state, it might feel like it takes a while for this to be comfortable. Let's do one more time. Inhale to go up. And this time, see if you can stay up. You may even be able to add the shoulders. Tuck one shoulder under and then the other. Press your upper arms firmly down. Press down with your elbows and perhaps also with the palms of your hands. Allow yourself to breathe in. This is called bridge pose or Setu Bandhasana in Sanskrit. And breathe in one more time. And on the exhale, let the spine start rolling down one vertebrae at a time as you sweep the arms overhead on the floor. You can give a little tug to the arm so that you're really bringing the spine down, getting longer all through the torso. And then relax the effort of your arms and your legs. And breathe in and notice any greater access you now have to the abdominal breath, to having come back home, as it were. And once more, you can give yourself a little phrase, insert a little positive statement towards yourself. Something like, my life matters, or my participation matters, matters to you, matters to others. Or perhaps just a gentle sense of like, it's okay to release the tension, or the tension isn't mine to carry. Sometimes you're carrying the tension of others from a long time back. Or maybe a phrase like, I release the tension, and letting it go back into the universe, which, by the way, it can be absorbed. You can send that tension into the element of air or fire or water, and nature will take care of that for you. Okay, and let's come to Shavasana for those of us who are in class this morning. Cover up where you like. Just take a few minutes of resting in Shavasana. You just gave your nervous system a bath. This is a time to receive the medicine of that. Allow yourself to be breathed by the body and the breath without getting in the way. Deeply relax. You can imagine that even long-held patterns are evaporating right now. The parts of you that learned to create safety can see that you have a new access to a deeper safety. It's safety of being connected to yourself, to the earth, to a healthy community. Gently roll the head side to side. Wiggle your fingers and your toes. Okay, bend your knees. Please roll to your side. Return to sitting. And you come up to take a seat. I'm going to ask you to make a respectful gesture for yourself and also to acknowledge. So you may choose this gesture, respecting on the hand on the heart, like your highest intention, your deepest desire, your longing for healing and wholeness for yourself and also for others. It's not just a solo journey. And then also acknowledge parts of you that learned to create patterns of safety, whether that was through fight, flight, freeze, submit, please and appease, acquiesce and regress, self-abandonment, all those things, to acknowledge the parts of you that needed to create that safety. They were carrying some vulnerability for a long time. And let those parts know that you have a more loving and more wise offer for them based on present day resources, present moment capacities, wisdom teachings, a spiritual path and practice, attuned companions on the path, and your own inner loving witness available to these parts of you. And then we'll join both hands to the heart. And thank you so much for sharing your practice this morning. Namaste. As we close today's practice, let's acknowledge all of the parts within us that learned how to navigate vulnerability, whatever form that vulnerability took: chaos, neglect, abuse, misattunement, upheavals, whatever those things might have been. Acknowledging those parts that learned to navigate vulnerability by creating safety mechanisms, survival strategies. Even though those became protective and then preservative and then preventative, even though those became painful in some ways, let's acknowledge those parts of ourselves and let them all be reassured by this inner wisdom that is growing in you, that you can stay connected to. Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your practice with me and with this community, this training community. I hope you found this to be informative and meaningful. Of course, if you have questions or comments, you can leave those down below the video. We look forward to your input about your experience. And also don't forget that we do have a yoga teacher training school and a yoga therapy training school. You can learn more about that at this URL here along the bottom of the screen. And please subscribe to the channel. It's affirmative for us that this content is helpful to you, and we'll keep creating more content for you and for the community.